Teresa needed to smile, raise her glass, accept the congratulations gracefully before the weight of exhaustion pulled her under. 6 months climbing the corporate ladder, and tonight she'd finally reached the summit. Yet sitting in Azure Moon's velvet booth, champagne bubbling in crystal flutes, the celebration felt hollow. Each toast grew louder, each laugh stretched thinner. But then a sensation crept across her skin, so subtle she nearly dismissed it beneath the restaurant's ambient music. She paused, wine glass halfway to her lips. There again, the unmistakable weight of being watched. Teresa turned her head toward the private dining section, scanning past silk screens and candlelit tables. In the shadows beyond the main room, a figure sat alone. Even from this distance, his stillness commanded attention. Dark suit, darker eyes, and an intensity that made the space between them feel charged. Their gazes locked. Recognition slammed into her chest like ice water. She'd seen that face 3 weeks ago, late-night news flickering across her laptop screen. The investigation into organized crime in Denver's underground. Young Jimin, they'd called him. No charges filed, insufficient evidence, the reporter had said with barely concealed frustration. But Teresa remembered the way the man's photograph had made her pause. Handsome in a dangerous way, tattoos visible at his collar, a presence that dominated even through a screen. And now he was here, watching her with the kind of focus that suggested this wasn't coincidence. Teresa, you okay? Her friend Simone touched her arm, concerned. You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine. The lie tasted bitter. Just need the restroom. She stood too quickly, smoothing her black dress with trembling hands. The man, Jimin, rose from his seat in the same moment, his movements fluid, purposeful. He began walking toward her table. Panic clawed up Teresa's throat. The sensible choice was clear. Return to her friends, stay in the crowded dining room, finish the evening surrounded by witnesses. Nothing could happen to her here, not in public, not with dozens of people around. Yet her feet carried her in the opposite direction, toward the discreet service door she'd noticed earlier. Away from the celebration. Away from safety. Foolish woman, Teresa muttered, already pushing through the swinging door into the kitchen's chaos. The shock of industrial noise assaulted her senses. Shouting chefs, clattering pans, the hiss of flames. Staff in white uniforms moved with choreographed precision, too focused on their work to notice her. She weaved between steel prep tables, heart hammering against her ribs. Past the dish station. Through a narrow corridor lined with supplies. The kitchen seemed to expand forever, a maze designed to trap rather than release. A door appeared on her left, unmarked, promising escape. Teresa yanked it open. Cold air rushed out to meet her. Not an exit, a storage room. Industrial shelving lined the walls, stocked with dry goods and equipment. But there at the far end, another door. Had to be. Had to lead somewhere. She stepped inside. Her heels clicked against concrete. 3 steps. 4. Behind her, the door swung shut with a soft click that echoed like a gunshot. Teresa spun around, reaching for the handle. Her fingers had barely grazed the metal when she heard it. The unmistakable sound of a lock engaging. Then footsteps, measured and deliberate, approaching from the kitchen she'd just fled. The door opened. Jimin filled the doorway, one tattooed hand resting casually on the lock mechanism. Up close, he was devastating. Sharp jawline, eyes that held secrets and promises in equal measure, an aura of controlled danger that made the small room feel suffocating. He stepped inside. Let the door close behind him. Locked it again with practiced ease. Running from me, Teresa? His voice was dangerously soft, accented with something that made her name sound like a caress and a threat. She pressed back against the shelving, chin lifting defiantly despite the fear coursing through her veins. You know my name. I know everything about you. He moved closer, each step deliberate. Your apartment on Larimer Street. Your morning coffee order, oat milk lot extra shot. The way you bite your lip when you're reviewing financial reports. Another step. That you were promoted to senior analyst exactly 1 week ago. How? Her breath caught. You've been watching me. For 6 months. No shame in his admission. Since the day you walked into Hannum Trading to audit their books. You sat in that conference room for 3 hours and you never flinched. Not when they tried to intimidate you with their silence. Not when Park raised his voice. You simply looked up from your laptop and asked for the documents you'd requested. His eyes gleamed with something Teresa couldn't name. I watched you through the glass partition and thought, there she is. The woman who'll either destroy me or save me. That was your company. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. You're Young Jimin. Yes. He stopped arm's length away, close enough that she could smell expensive cologne and something underneath. Smoke, whiskey, danger. And you, Teresa Lawson, have been living in my thoughts ever since. I've been patient. Waiting for the right moment. His gaze traveled over her face like a physical touch. But seeing you tonight in my restaurant sitting in the booth I specifically reserved for you. You arranged this? The words emerged as barely a whisper. Your friend Simone's boyfriend works at Hanum. I ensured he knew about the cancellation that opened up tonight's reservation. Jimin's mouth curved slightly. I'm tired of watching from a distance. Tired of pretending I don't want you with every breath I take. Teresa's pulse thundered in her ears. He should be terrified. Should be screaming for help, fighting to escape. Instead, she found herself transfixed by his raw honesty, by the intensity burning in his eyes. You're a criminal. She forced steel into her voice. Yes. I could destroy you. Report everything I saw in those books. You could. He took another half step closer. But you won't. Because you're too smart to play games with incomplete information. And because... His hand rose slowly, giving her time to flinch away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her jawline with unexpected gentleness. Part of you has been feeling it too. This pull between us. This impossible, undeniable magnetism. Teresa's breath hitched. She wanted to deny it. Wanted to slap his hand away and demand he let her leave. But his touch ignited something in her chest. Recognition maybe, or the acknowledgement of a truth she'd been avoiding. What do you want from me? The question emerged smaller than she'd intended. Everything. The word was simple, absolute. But I'll start with dinner. A conversation. A chance for you to know me, the man, not the reputation. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I'm giving you a choice, Teresa. Walk away right now and I'll never approach you again. You have my word. Or, his voice dropped lower, intimate and devastating. Stay. Have dinner with me. Let me show you who I really am. And if I choose to leave, then I unlock this door and let you go. He pulled back slightly, his hand falling away. As if to prove his point, he reached behind him, disengaged the lock. The choice is yours. It always has been. Teresa stared at the now unlocked door. Freedom waited just beyond it. Safety. Her carefully controlled life, unmarred by danger or passion or the kind of intensity that could consume a person whole. She looked back at Jimin. At the challenge in his eyes, the hunger barely restrained, the promise of something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The door remained unlocked. The path to escape clear. But something in her chest, some reckless, hidden part of herself she'd suppressed for years, whispered a different answer. Lightning flashed beyond the restaurant's walls, and in that brief illumination, Teresa saw her reflection in the steel shelving behind Jimin. A woman at a crossroads. A woman who'd spent her entire life choosing safety over desire. When darkness fell again, there was only the sound of her racing heartbeat and the dangerous promise hanging in the air between them. Teresa just made a choice that will change everything. If you're already hooked on this dangerous love story, do me a favor. Smash that like button right now. It tells me you want more intense, passionate stories like this. Hit subscribe because this tale of obsession and power is just getting started. And comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love knowing my dark romance family spans the globe. Now let's see just how deep Teresa falls into Jimin's world. Teresa told herself she could return to normal. 3 days after Azure Moon, after that charged confrontation in the storage room, after agreeing to dinner she still hadn't scheduled, she tried to slip back into her carefully ordered life. But normal had become a fiction the moment young Jimin locked that door behind them. Monday morning she stopped at Stella's Coffee like always. The barista had her oat milk latte ready before she reached the counter. But sitting at the corner table, newspaper open and espresso untouched, was Jimin. He didn't approach. Didn't speak. Just watched her over the rim of his cup with those dark, knowing eyes until her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped her drink. Tuesday, leaving her office building after a brutal day of meetings, Teresa spotted him across the street. leaning against a black Mercedes, arms crossed, perfectly still while the evening crowd flowed around him like water around stone. Their eyes met. He nodded once. She forced herself to keep walking, feeling his gaze burn into her back until she turned the corner. Wednesday brought flowers to her desk. 24 black roses in a crystal vase, so dark they seemed to absorb light. The card read, "You haven't called. I'm patient but not infinitely so." Her assistant Monica had raised an eyebrow. Secret admirer? Teresa had shoved the card in her drawer and tried to ignore how her pulse raced. Thursday, Simone dragged her to an art gallery opening in Lodo. Teresa had agreed, desperate for distraction for normalcy. But 20 minutes into forced conversation about abstract expressionism she felt it again, that electric awareness of being watched. She turned and there he was. Immaculate in a charcoal suit, holding a glass of wine he hadn't touched, studying her instead of the artwork. "That's the third time this week," Simone whispered following her gaze. "Who is he?" "No one." Another lie added to the growing collection. "He looks at you like you're the only person in the room." "That's not nothing, Teresa." But it was too much. Everything about Jimin was too much, too intense, too dangerous, too honest in a world that trafficked in polite deceptions. Teresa excused herself and escaped to the gallery's back exit, gulping cold November air like she'd been drowning. She made it home without incident and threw herself into research. If Jimin wanted to play games, she'd learn the rules. Her laptop glowed in the darkness as she dug into his history. Young Jimin, second-generation Korean American. Father killed in a robbery when Jimin was 15. Officially. Unofficially, whispers of a gang execution, debts unpaid, territories disputed. The boy had inherited nothing but enemies and a dying restaurant in 5 Points. 10 years later, young Jimin controlled Denver's Korean district and beyond. Real estate, nightclubs, restaurants, import-export businesses that probably imported more than produce. No arrests. No convictions. Just rumors and bodies that occasionally surfaced in the South Platte River. But also, community centers funded anonymously, small business loans that saved immigrant families, a reputation for protecting his territory's residents from other predators. Complex, she told Simone when asked. He was devastatingly, dangerously complex. Friday night, Teresa stayed late at the office, hoping distance would break whatever spell Jimin had woven. She left at 9, heels clicking against the parking garage's concrete, her mind already cataloging weekend tasks. Alone. Finally alone. Teresa, wait up." She turned to find Marcus from accounting stumbling toward her, tie loosened, words slurred. The happy hour crowd must have hit the bar across the street. She'd declined the invitation as always. "Marcus, you should call an Uber. Been wanting to talk to you." He crowded closer, bourbon breath hot on her face. "You think you're so much better than everyone." Little ice queen in her corner office. Teresa stepped back, keys gripped between her fingers. "You're drunk. Go home. Not before you and me have a conversation." His hand shot out, grabbed her wrist. "Heart. You owe me that much after stealing the promotion I deserved. Let go." Fear spiked through her, cold and sharp. "Make me." Marcus pulled her closer, his other hand reaching for her waist. Then he was gone. Teresa blinked, disoriented. One moment Marcus had been grabbing her. The next he was on the ground 3 feet away, cradling his wrist and screaming. And between them stood Jimin, appearing from the shadows like he'd been conjured from her darkest fantasies. "She told you to let go." Jimin's voice was ice wrapped in silk. He crouched beside Marcus, who whimpered and tried to scramble backward. "When a woman says no, you listen. Let me help you remember." The crack of bone was sickeningly loud in the enclosed space. Marcus's scream echoed off concrete walls. Jimin stood, brushing imaginary dust from his suit, completely unmoved by the man writhing at his feet. "You broke his wrist," Teresa whispered, torn between horror and a darker feeling she didn't want to name. "I broke his wrist," Jimin agreed. He turned to her and his eyes were no longer cold. They burned. "If he'd touched you anywhere else, I'd have broken more than that. You were watching me. Again. Always. No apology. No shame. Did you think I'd leave you unprotected after you agreed to let me into your life? Teresa should call the police. Should run. She'd do anything except stand there while warmth spread through her chest at his words. Protected. When had anyone ever made her feel protected instead of like she had to protect herself? Come on. Jimin's hand extended toward her, palm up. An invitation, not a demand. Let's get you home. She looked at Marcus, still moaning on the ground. At Jimin, dangerous and patient and waiting for her choice. At her own hand, trembling as it rose. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and sure, and Teresa let young Jimin lead her to his Mercedes. He opened the passenger door, waited until she was settled, closed it with careful precision. When he slid into the driver's seat, he didn't start the engine immediately. You researched me, he said. Not a question. Yes. What did you learn? That you're a criminal who builds community centers. A killer who protects immigrant families. A ghost who operates in plain sight. She turned to face him. Who are you really, Jimin? He was quiet for a long moment, city lights casting shadows across his sharp features. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. I was 8 when we came to America. My father believed in the dream. Work hard, keep your head down, build something better for your children. His jaw tightened. He worked 16-hour days at the restaurant. Paid protection money to 3 different gangs. Bowed his head when they came to collect. And one night when he couldn't pay, they killed him in the alley behind his own business while I hid in the dumpster and listened. Teresa's breath caught. She wanted to touch him, to offer comfort, but something in his posture warned against it. I inherited his debts and his dreams, Jimin continued. I was 15. Too young, too weak, too immigrant to matter. Law enforcement didn't care. The gangs thought I'd fold or disappear. Instead, I learned their games and played them better. By 20, I owned that block. By 25, the whole district. He turned to look at her, and the raw honesty in his eyes stole her breath. I'm not a good man, Teresa. But I protect my people. I keep them safe when no one else will. That's who I am. And what am I to you? He had to know. One more thing to possess? No. His hand rose, cupped her cheek with devastating gentleness. You're the first person in 10 years who makes me want to be more than I am. Who makes me remember there's more to life than territory and vengeance. You terrify me, Teresa Lawson. Because for the first time since my father died, I have something to lose. The confession hung between them, raw and dangerous. Teresa leaned into his touch despite every warning bell clanging in her mind. You scare me too. Everything about you scares me. Good. His thumb traced her lower lip. Fear means you're smart enough to understand what this is. What we could be. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her mouth. I'm going to kiss you now. If you don't want that, tell me to stop. Teresa's heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment. The choice that would change everything. She didn't tell him to stop. Jimin's mouth met hers with controlled intensity, claiming and questioning in the same breath. Teresa gasped, and he deepened the kiss, one hand threading through her hair while the other pulled her closer across the console. She tasted whiskey and danger and dark promises. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer even as logic screamed at her to push away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jimin rested his forehead against hers. Let me take you home, he murmured. Let me make sure you're safe. Teresa nodded, incapable of speech. As Jimin pulled out of the parking garage, his hand found hers, their fingers interlacing like they'd been designed to fit together. And for the first time in her carefully controlled life, Teresa Lawson let herself fall into the dangerous unknown. But as the Mercedes glided through Denver's streets, neither of them noticed the black SUV that pulled away from the curb 2 cars behind them, following at a careful distance. And neither saw the man in the passenger seat lift a camera to capture them through the telephoto lens. The Yamazaki were watching. And they just discovered young Jimin's greatest weakness. Teresa chose the restaurant carefully. Bistro Vodome. Public, well-lit. Impossible for disappearances or dark confessions. When Jimin arrived exactly on time, heads turned. He commanded attention effortlessly in a midnight blue suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, his tattooed hands the only hint of the danger beneath the sophisticated veneer. You picked French, he said, pulling out her chair with old-world courtesy that shouldn't have charmed her but did. Testing whether I'm just another thug who stumbled into power? Are you? Teresa challenged, watching him settle across from her. His smile was sharp, knowing. Order in French and find out. She did. He responded in flawless Parisian French, then switched to Korean when the sommelier approached, earning an approving nod. Throughout dinner, Jimin effortlessly navigated conversations about philosophy, art, the ethics of power, all while his eyes promised things that had nothing to do with intellectual discourse. The dragon on your neck, Teresa said, emboldened by wine and curiosity. What does it represent? Jimin's fingers traced the ink that curled from beneath his collar. My father. Dragons protect their treasure. He died protecting his. His hand moved to his wrist, where intricate characters wrapped around the bone. These are the names of people I've sworn to protect. 17 so far. Each one a promise I'll keep or die trying. And the tiger on your forearm? That one's different. His eyes darkened with something Teresa couldn't name. That's for the man I had to become to keep all these other promises. The part of me that hunts, that kills, that doesn't hesitate when violence is necessary. He leaned forward, voice dropping. Does that frighten you? It should. Teresa met his gaze without flinching. But you don't wear your violence like armor. You wear it like penance. Jimin went very still. You see too much. Maybe you're finally letting someone look. The conversation shifted, deepened. Jimin asked about her dreams beyond quarterly reports and boardroom victories. Teresa surprised herself by answering honestly, admitting she wanted something more than the hollow success she'd been chasing, confessing the loneliness of her carefully constructed life. With Jimin, the walls she'd built came down brick by brick, and instead of feeling vulnerable, she felt free. When dinner ended, Jimin insisted on walking her home. Denver's streets were cold and empty, their breath forming clouds in the November air. At her building's entrance, Teresa turned to say goodnight and found Jimin watching her with an intensity that made her knees weak. Thank you for tonight, he said softly. For giving me a chance to be more than what you read in police reports. Jimin. His name on her lips felt dangerous, intimate. I should go. But he didn't move, trapped in the same magnetic pull that held Teresa frozen. She made the choice before logic could intervene. Teresa closed the distance between them and kissed him. Hard, desperate, pouring 3 weeks of tension and denial into the press of her mouth against his. Jimin made a sound low in his throat, his hands coming up to frame her face, kissing her back with barely restrained hunger. Then Teresa pulled away, breathing hard, and fled into her building without looking back. She didn't see Jimin standing on the sidewalk, eyes closed, hand pressed to his mouth like he could hold on to the taste of her. Didn't hear him whisper, God help me, I'm lost. 5 days of silence followed. Teresa told herself it was relief. Told herself she'd dodged a bullet, that running had been the smart choice. But every morning she checked her phone for messages that never came. Every night she lay awake remembering the heat of Jimin's mouth on hers. Then Simone called with a rescue mission disguised as an obligation. The Children's Hospital fundraiser. I know you hate these things, but please? I already RSVP'd for both of us. Teresa agreed because the alternative was another night alone with her thoughts. She wore armor in the form of a red dress and diamond earrings, determined to smile and write checks and feel nothing. The ballroom glittered with Denver's elite, champagne flowing while an auctioneer solicited bids for various luxury items. Teresa was only half listening until Lot 17 appeared on screen, a first edition of Langston Hughes' poetry signed from a private collection. We'll start bidding at 5,000. 10,000, Teresa called out, unable to help herself. Her mother had read Hughes to her as a child. This piece of history called to something deep in her soul. 15,000. A male voice from the back. 20,000, Teresa countered, turning to see who dared challenge her. Her breath stopped. Jimin stood at the back of the ballroom, devastating in a black tuxedo, his eyes locked on her with predatory focus. He raised his paddle. 50,000. The room went silent. Teresa's heart hammered. He wasn't bidding on the book. He was sending her a message. 60,000, she said, voice steady despite her racing pulse. Jimin smiled, slow and dangerous. $100,000. The auctioneer stammered. Going once, twice, sold to bidder 93. Teresa's hands shook as Jimin walked toward her through the parting crowd. He collected his prize, then crossed to where she stood rooted to the floor. I believe this is yours. He held out the leather-bound volume. Everything I have is yours, Teresa. You just have to be brave enough to take it. Why? The question emerged as barely a whisper. Because 5 days without you proved something I already knew. His free hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing her lips. I'll burn down the world to see you smile. I'll buy every treasure you desire. I'll become whatever you need me to be. His voice dropped, rough with emotion. I'm yours, Teresa. I have been since the moment you walked into that conference room and refused to be intimidated. Teresa's carefully maintained control shattered. Take me home. Not mine. Yours. Jimin's eyes flared dark with desire. Are you sure? I haven't been sure of anything since I met you. But I'm tired of running from the only thing that makes me feel alive. They barely made it to his penthouse. The elevator ride was torture. Jimin pressed against her back, his breath hot on her neck, hands gripping the rail on either side of her body to keep from touching her. If you've changed your mind, tell me now, he growled against her ear. Because once I have you, Teresa, I'm never letting go. Stop talking, she breathed, and opened the door. The penthouse was all floor-to-ceiling windows and dark luxury, but Teresa saw none of it. Jimin backed her against the door the moment it closed, his mouth finding hers with devastating precision. This kiss was nothing like the one she'd stolen on her doorstep. This was possession and surrender, claim and counterclaim. Tell me what you want, Jimin demanded, trailing kisses down her throat. Everything. I want everything. He lifted her easily, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her through the penthouse. They left a trail of clothing, his jacket, her shoes, his tie pulled free by her desperate hands. When Jimin laid her on his bed, the city lights of Denver spreading below them, Teresa saw the truth in his eyes. This wasn't just desire. This was devotion wrapped in darkness. Last chance, he said hoarsely, hovering above her. After this, you're mine. Teresa pulled him down to her. Then claim me. What followed was intense, passionate, transformative. Jimin touched her like he was memorizing scripture, worshipped her like she was salvation and damnation combined. Teresa discovered she could be both fierce and vulnerable, that surrendering to him made her stronger, not weaker. They moved together like they'd been designed for this, for each other, two halves of a dangerous whole finally made complete. Later, as dawn painted the sky purple and gold, Teresa lay in Jimin's arms, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her spine, and she felt the raised edges of more tattoos she hadn't yet explored. What are you thinking? He murmured. Teresa lifted her head to meet his eyes. That I should be terrified. That this is insane. That everything about you should send me running. She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. But all I feel is found. Jimin's arms tightened around her. You undo me, Teresa Lawson. She smiled against his skin. Good. You've been undoing me since the moment you locked that door. They drifted into sleep as the city woke below, wrapped in each other and the dangerous peace of new lovers. Neither heard the phone vibrating on the nightstand, the screen lighting with an urgent message from Jimin's lieutenant. We have a problem. The Yamazaki know about the girl. The war was coming. But in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms, Teresa and Jimin had already crossed the point of no return. Teresa woke to unfamiliar silk sheets and the weight of Jimin's arm draped across her waist. Morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting Denver in shades of gold and shadow. For a moment, wrapped in warmth and his steady breathing, she could pretend this was normal. That she was normal. That the man beside her didn't have blood on his hands and enemies who would kill to get to him. The illusion shattered when she felt the gun holstered beneath the pillow on his side of the bed. Jimin stirred, pressing a kiss to her bare shoulder. Stay, he murmured against her skin. I should go home. Change. I have work. Teresa. He turned her to face him and the intensity in his dark eyes stole her breath. We need to talk about what this means. They moved to his kitchen, all marble and steel, absurdly domestic while discussing impossibly dark things. Jimin made coffee with practiced ease, but his movements were tense, controlled. When he finally spoke, he didn't sugarcoat anything. Being with me means you're never truly safe again. It means looking over your shoulder. It means some nights I'll disappear and you can't ask where I've been. It means enemies I've made will see you as leverage, as a weakness to exploit. His jaw tightened. It means living in shadows I never wanted to pull you into. Teresa's coffee went cold in her hands. The weight of his words pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. This wasn't romance novel danger, mysterious and thrilling from a distance. This was real. People died in Jimin's world. And now she was part of it. I need time, she whispered. To think. To process. Something flickered in Jimin's eyes, hurt maybe or fear, but he nodded. Take all the time you need. But Teresa. He caught her hand as she stood to leave. Whatever you decide, I'm not sorry. Not for a single moment with you. 5 days passed in agonizing slowness. Teresa threw herself into work, tried to resurrect her old life, but everything felt colorless now. Simone noticed her distraction, the way she jumped at sudden sounds, how she checked her phone obsessively for messages that never came. Jimin was giving her space, but his absence felt like a physical ache. Then the invitation arrived. Elegant black cardstock, silver lettering. Eclipse. Midnight. Come see my world. J. Eclipse was legendary. Denver's most exclusive nightclub. Impossible to get into unless you knew the right people. Or owned it, apparently. Teresa told herself she was going for closure, to prove she could walk away. But when she slipped into a black dress that hugged every curve and painted her lips deep red, she knew she was lying. The club pulsed with dark energy. Red lights cut through cigarette smoke and expensive perfume. Beautiful people moved like predators on the dance floor while VIP booths held conversations that could topple empires. Teresa felt eyes tracking her as security led her upstairs to a private section overlooking the chaos below. Jimin waited there, devastating in all black, surrounded by men who radiated controlled violence. His eyes found hers across the room and everything else dissolved. He excused himself from the table, moving toward her with that fluid grace she'd come to crave. You came. Relief and hunger warred in his voice. I'm still thinking, Teresa said, but she let him pull her close, let his hand settle possessively on her lower back. Think all you want. Dance with me first. On the floor, pressed against him while bass thundered through her bones, Teresa felt alive in a way her carefully controlled life had never allowed. Jimin's hands on her hips, his breath hot against her neck, the way he moved with barely restrained hunger. This was intoxicating. Dangerous. Everything she'd been taught to avoid. I've missed you, he growled in her ear. Every fucking second. Teresa turned in his arms, rising on her toes to answer him with her mouth instead of words. The kiss was fire and desperation, 5 days of denial burning away in an instant. Jimin groaned, deepening the kiss, his hands sliding lower. The first gunshot cracked through the music like thunder. Chaos erupted instantly. The crowd screamed, bodies surging toward exits. But Teresa's eyes had already found the muzzle flash from the second-floor balcony opposite them, saw the gunman taking aim at Jimin's head. Down. Her scream cut through the noise. Jimin moved on instinct, pulling them both to the floor as the bullet whistled past where his skull had been a heartbeat before. His security materialized from nowhere, returning fire, but more shooters emerged from the crowd. The Yamazaki had come prepared. Glass shattered. People fell. Teresa's ears rang from the gunfire, but all she could focus on was Jimin covering her body with his own, shielding her from the violence he'd warned her about. His hand pressed her face into his chest, protecting her even as bullets tore through the air around them. Then Jimin jerked and Teresa felt warm wetness seep through his shirt. No. No, 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 she tried to pull back to see, but Jimin held her tight. Stay down, he commanded, voice strained. Don't move. His men ended it brutally. The gunfire stopped. In the terrible silence that followed, Teresa heard Jimin's ragged breathing, felt his grip weakening. When she finally pulled back, blood bloomed across his shoulder, spreading like a dark flower. You're shot. Oh God, you're bleeding. I'm fine. His hand cupped her face, checking for injuries even as he bled. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? You took a bullet and you're asking if I'm hurt? Teresa's voice broke. Jimin's lieutenants surrounded them, already moving them toward a back exit. Teresa registered fragments. The bodies left behind, the scared civilians, the smell of gunpowder and blood. They piled into an SUV that tore through Denver streets toward what Jimin called the safe house. In a nondescript building's sterile room, doctors worked on Jimin's shoulder while he refused sedation, his eyes never leaving Teresa's face. She held his free hand, her fingers white-knuckled around his, while they dug the bullet out and stitched him closed. When the doctors finally left, Jimin pulled her closer with his good arm. His face was pale, etched with pain and something deeper, resignation maybe or regret. "This is what loving me means," he said hoarsely. "Bullets and blood and nights like this. Are you sure? Because I'll let you go right now if you want out. I'll make sure you're protected, that you're safe, but I'll let you walk away." Teresa looked at him, this dangerous, complex man who'd taken a bullet for her, who'd warned her about the darkness but couldn't hide the desperate hope in his eyes. She thought about her empty apartment, her colorless life, the years of safety that had never made her feel truly alive. She kicked off her heels and climbed onto the bed beside him, careful of his injury. "I'm not going anywhere. Teresa. I spent 5 days trying to convince myself I could go back to who I was before you." She pressed her hand over his heart, feeling it thunder beneath her palm. "But that woman doesn't exist anymore. You changed me, Jimin. And I don't want to change back." His good arm wrapped around her, pulling her as close as his injury allowed. "You're my greatest weakness now. They'll keep coming for you. Then teach me to be your greatest strength instead." Teresa lifted her head to meet his eyes. "I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. All of it." Jimin's kiss tasted like blood and promise and the beginning of something that would either save them or destroy them both. Teresa stayed beside him through the night, feeling his breathing even out, his grip on her never loosening even in sleep. When dawn came, painting the room in shades of gray and gold, Teresa understood the truth. She'd crossed a line tonight that could never be uncrossed. The Yamazaki had declared war. And she'd just chosen her side. Teresa should have known better than to let her guard down. 1 week of relative peace after the nightclub shooting, 1 week of Jimin's heightened security trailing her everywhere, and she'd started to believe maybe they could have this. Maybe love in the shadows was possible. She dismissed Jimin's guard at her apartment door. Just for an hour she'd insisted, needing space to breathe, to feel like herself. He'd argued, those dark eyes flashing with worry, but eventually relented. 1 hour, he'd said, kissing her hard enough to bruise. Then Minjun comes back whether you like it or not. 43 minutes later her apartment door exploded inward. 3 men in black tactical gear moved with military precision. Teresa lunged for her phone, but a hand caught her wrist, twisting until she heard something crack. Pain exploded white-hot up her arm. She screamed, driving her knee into her attacker's groin, but another grabbed her from behind, chloroform-soaked cloth clamping over her mouth and nose. The world tilted. Teresa fought against the chemical drowsiness, clawing at the arms restraining her, but her vision tunneled. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was her phone on the floor, Jimin's name on the screen as he called, unable to reach her. She woke to concrete and pain. Her head throbbed, her wrist screamed agony, broken, she realized distantly. The warehouse around her was vast and empty except for a single chair where they'd bound her, and the man standing in the shadows watching her regain consciousness. Teresa Lawson. His English was perfect, accent barely detectable. He stepped into the light, mid-40s, expensive suit, eyes cold as winter. "I am Tanaka Kenji. You are dating a man who has caused my organization significant inconvenience. Go to hell." Her voice came out hoarse but defiant. Kenji smiled, and it was worse than his anger would have been. "Young Jimin has taken territory that belongs to the Yamazaki. Killed our men. Disrupted operations worth millions. And now we discover he has a weakness. You. I'm not telling you anything. You misunderstand." Kenji circled her slowly, a predator assessing prey. "I don't need information. I need him to suffer. And what better way than through the woman foolish enough to love a monster?" He nodded to one of his men who approached with a camera. They were going to film this. Send it to Jimin. Use her pain as a weapon. Teresa lifted her chin, meeting Kenji's eyes with steel she didn't know she possessed. "You think breaking me will break him? You don't know either of us." The first blow snapped her head sideways. Then came the questions she refused to answer, the threats she absorbed with clenched teeth. They didn't touch her sexually. Kenji was too calculated for that, wanted her conscious and aware for maximum psychological impact. But the fear was its own torture, the anticipation of what might come next. Hours bled together. Teresa focused on breathing, on staying present, on the memory of Jimin's hands gentle on her skin, his voice rough with emotion. "You undo me. She'd found strength in his darkness. Now she'd prove she could survive it. When they finally left her alone, she waited until the guard's attention drifted. The hairpin Jimin had given her. Decorative, he'd said, but the way he'd shown her how it could be used as a weapon had been anything but casual, was still hidden in her hair. With her good hand she worked it free, her broken wrist screaming protest. Picking the zip ties took forever. Blood made her fingers slippery, her vision swimming from pain and dehydration. But Teresa thought of Jimin tearing through Denver looking for her, thought of the moment he'd find her broken, and fury ignited in her chest. He would not be a victim. Not anymore. The ties finally gave. Teresa stood on shaking legs, hairpin gripped like a knife. The guard by the door was checking his phone, bored. She moved on silent feet, years of ballet classes from childhood giving her balance even through the pain. She struck fast, hairpin driving into the soft flesh of his neck, not deep enough to kill but enough to drop him choking. His partner rushed from the hallway and Teresa grabbed the fallen guard's gun, swinging it like a club. The metal connected with the second man's temple. He went down hard. Teresa's hands shook as she checked the gun. Of course. But she had the element of surprise and nothing left to lose. She dragged herself toward the warehouse's far door, every step agony, leaving a trail of blood from her wrist. The door was locked. Teresa's vision grayed. She'd come so far, fought so hard. Gunfire erupted outside. Not the controlled shots of an execution but the chaotic thunder of a war. Teresa pressed herself against the wall as the warehouse's main entrance exploded inward, the doors blown off their hinges. Jimin came through the smoke like an avenging angel, gun raised, his men flanking him in tactical formation. His face was a mask of cold fury, eyes scanning the space with predatory focus. Behind him, bodies littered the approach, the Yamazaki soldiers who'd tried to stop him. Teresa. His roar echoed off concrete. Here. Her voice was barely a whisper but he heard it, head snapping toward her. Their eyes met across the warehouse and something fundamental shifted in the air between them. Jimin closed the distance in seconds, but stopped short, taking in her bloodied face, her cradled wrist, the two unconscious men at her feet. I wasn't going to wait for rescue. Teresa swayed and Jimin caught her, his hands impossibly gentle despite the violence still thrumming through him. Baby. God, what did they? His voice cracked as he touched her face with shaking fingers, checking every injury, his usual control shattered. I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. I should have. You found me. Teresa gripped his shirt with her good hand, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a tilting world. You came for me. I burned half of Denver to get here. His forehead pressed against hers. There is nothing I wouldn't destroy to bring you home. Nothing. Kenji's voice cut through the moment. Touching. The monster and his whore. Jimin moved like lightning, positioning himself between Teresa and the Yamazaki underboss who'd emerged from the shadows, gun aimed at them both. But it was Teresa who spoke, her voice steady despite her injuries. I'm not his whore. I'm his equal. She stepped out from behind Jimin's protection, chin lifted. And you just made a very serious mistake. Teresa. Jimin's warning died as she continued. You wanted to use me to break him. Instead, you've just given him a reason to end you. Teresa's eyes were cold, channeling every ounce of darkness she'd absorbed from Jimin's world. And me? I'm going to watch. Kenji laughed. Bold words from a broken woman. She's not broken. Jimin's voice was death and promise. She's become exactly what I knew she could be, dangerous. His arm wrapped around Teresa's waist, pulling her against his side. And she's mine. Teresa turned in his embrace, one hand fisting in his hair as she pulled him down to her. And you're mine, she said against his mouth, then kissed him hard enough to taste blood. Hers or his, it didn't matter anymore. The kiss was a declaration. A claiming. Witnessed by both Jimin's soldiers and the Yamazaki who'd dared to take her. When they finally broke apart, something had fundamentally changed in how his men looked at her. Not as a weakness anymore, but as something equally dangerous as their boss. Kenji raised his gun but Jimin was faster. 3 shots, center mass, and the Yamazaki underboss fell. The remaining enemy soldiers dropped their weapons, smart enough to know when a war was lost. Get them out, Jimin ordered his lieutenant, never taking his eyes off Teresa. And make sure the message is clear. Anyone who touches what's mine dies screaming. As his men dragged the survivors away, Jimin finally let his control crack. He sank to his knees, pulling Teresa down with him, holding her like she might disappear if he loosened his grip. When I couldn't find you when I thought. His voice broke. I would have torn the world apart. I know. Teresa's good hand cradled his face, her thumb brushing away something that might have been tears. I felt you looking for me. Every second. They stayed like that in the blood-stained warehouse, two damaged people who'd found something fierce and terrible and irreplaceable in each other. The war with the Yamazaki was far from over. But they'd proven something tonight. They were stronger together than apart. And that made them the most dangerous force in Denver's underworld. Jimin's penthouse had been transformed into a fortress. Armed guards at every entrance, security feeds covering every angle, and in the center of his living room, 3 Yamazaki leaders kneeling on the marble floor, hands bound, surrounded by Jimin's men with guns trained on their heads. Teresa sat in a leather chair beside Jimin's, her broken wrist newly splinted, face cleaned of blood but still bearing the marks of her ordeal. She should have been upstairs resting, but when Jimin had suggested it, she'd fixed him with a look that made him smile despite everything. I earned the right to be here, she'd said. He hadn't argued. The head of the Yamazaki syndicate, Saito, was older than Teresa expected, silver-haired, dignified even in defeat. His eyes moved between Jimin and Teresa, calculating, assessing. You've made your point, Young. Sato's voice was steady. The warehouse. Kenji's death. The 17 of my men you butchered getting to her. 18, Jimin corrected coldly. 1 more died in surgery an hour ago. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, every inch the predator. You took something of mine. This is the consequence. She's just a woman. Jimin's gun was at Sato's temple before anyone could blink. Finish that sentence and I'll paint my floors with your brain. She's everything. Say her name with respect or don't say it at all. Teresa's hand touched Jimin's wrist, not pulling the gun away but grounding him. Let him speak. Jimin held position for 3 heartbeats, then lowered the weapon. But his eyes never left Sato's face. We underestimated you both, Saito admitted, his gaze shifting to Teresa with something like grudging respect. The woman we took was supposed to be leverage. Soft. Breakable. But the woman who stabbed my guard and knocked another unconscious with her bare hands. He paused. That woman is something else entirely. That woman, Teresa said softly, dangerously, is done being underestimated. By anyone. Saito nodded slowly. Then let me be clear, we surrender. Denver is yours, Young. Our operations, our territories, our remaining men. The Yamazaki will withdraw from Colorado completely. His jaw tightened. In exchange for our lives. Why should I let any of you breathe? Jimin's voice was ice. Because dead we're martyrs. Alive and defeated we're a warning. Saito met Jimin's eyes. Every syndicate from here to the coast will know. Young Jimin and the woman at his side are untouchable. Cross them and face extinction. The room fell silent except for the city's distant hum. Teresa felt the weight of every eye on her, on them. This was the moment that would define them in the underworld's collective memory. Jimin looked at Teresa, a question in his eyes. She gave the smallest nod. You have 72 hours to evacuate, Jimin said. Leave behind every asset, every operation, every dollar you've made on my streets. Anyone still here after that dies. Spread your warning, Saito. Make sure it reaches every coast, every organization. Teresa Lawson is mine and I am hers. Touch her and I'll show you horrors that make tonight look merciful. Saito bowed his head in acceptance. Jimin's men dragged the Yamazaki leaders away, leaving Jimin and Teresa alone in the sudden silence. The adrenaline that had sustained Teresa finally crashed. A sob tore from her throat, then another, her entire body shaking as the terror she'd suppressed came flooding back. Jimin was there instantly, gathering her carefully into his arms, mindful of her injuries. I was so scared, she gasped against his chest. I kept thinking, what if you didn't find me in time, what if they... But I did. You survived. You fought. His voice was rough with emotion. God, Teresa, you were magnificent. Terrifying. I've never been more proud or more fucking scared in my life. She pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down her face. I wanted to fight back. Not just survive but fight. Is that wrong? Should I be horrified by what I'm becoming? You're becoming exactly who you were always meant to be. Jimin cupped her face with infinite gentleness. Strong. Fierce. Mine. I love you. The words burst from Teresa like a confession. All of you, the monster and the man, the violence and the tenderness. I love you so much it terrifies me. Jimin's control finally shattered. He kissed her with desperate hunger, claiming and surrendering simultaneously. Losing you would have destroyed me, he breathed against her lips. You're not just in my world anymore, Teresa. You are my world. Their reunion was fierce despite her injuries, Jimin worshipping every bruise, every cut, whispering promises against her skin. This wasn't just desire. It was two souls recognizing they'd found their other half in darkness and choosing to burn together. Later, wrapped in silk sheets with dawn approaching, Jimin pressed a kiss to Teresa's temple. You'll never face danger alone again. Where you go, I go. What threatens you, I destroy. Teresa smiled against his chest, her good hand tracing the tattoos over his heart. Then we're going to be unstoppable. Outside, Denver slept, unaware that its underworld had shifted forever. Two forces had collided and emerged as one, more dangerous together than they'd ever been apart. And in the shadows, new enemies were already taking notice. 6 months had rewritten Teresa's entire existence. The woman who walked into the Paramount room bore little resemblance to the corporate analyst who'd once audited Hanum Trading. Teresa moved through the crowd of Denver's most dangerous power brokers in a blood-red dress that cost more than her old monthly salary, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. The broken wrist had healed, but she still wore Jimin's gift, a platinum bracelet that concealed a blade sharp enough to open throats. She'd learned to shoot with deadly accuracy, studied strategy with Jimin's most trusted advisors, used her financial expertise to legitimize portions of his empire while accepting the necessary darkness of others. Money laundering through legitimate businesses. Protection rackets that actually protected. The delicate balance between building and destroying. Gentlemen. Jimin's voice cut through the low conversations. He stood at the head of the table and every crime boss in the room quieted. You know why we're here. The Mexican cartels are pushing into our territories. Individually we negotiate. Together we dictate terms. His hand extended toward Teresa. My partner will present our proposal. Not his woman. Not his lover. His partner. Teresa took her place beside him, meeting each man's eyes without flinching. Some looked skeptical, she was still new to this world, still proving herself. Others watched with calculation, remembering the story of the Yamazaki's defeat, the woman who'd fought her way free. The cartels think we're fractured, Teresa began, her voice clear and commanding. They're counting on ego and competition to keep us divided. I propose we prove them wrong. She activated the presentation, numbers and territories displayed with corporate precision applied to criminal enterprise. Consolidated shipping routes. Shared intelligence networks. A united front that makes us too expensive to challenge. And who leads this alliance? Viktor Kozlov, head of the Russian operations, leaned back with amused skepticism. You little girl? Teresa smiled and there was nothing soft in it. I'm the woman who survived Yamazaki torture and walked out covered in their blood. I'm the mind behind Young's expansion into 6 new territories without losing a single shipment. And I'm the person standing between you and a cartel war you can't afford. She leaned forward, palms flat on the table. So yes, Victor. Me and Jimin. Together. Unless you'd prefer to negotiate with the cartels alone. The silence stretched. Then Kozlov laughed, genuine and approving. She has teeth. I like her. He raised his glass. To the Queen of Denver. May she be as ruthless as she is beautiful. The others joined the toast and Teresa felt the shift, from skepticism to acceptance. She'd earned this, not through Jimin's protection but through her own steel. Later, when the meeting concluded and territories were divided, Jimin found her on their penthouse balcony. Denver sprawled below them in glittering lights, a kingdom they ruled from the shadows. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. You were magnificent tonight, he murmured against her neck. Watching you command that room, I've never wanted you more. Teresa leaned into his embrace, feeling utterly at peace in a way her old life had never allowed. Kozlov called me Queen of Denver. That's what you are. Jimin turned her to face him, his eyes intense. My queen. My partner. My equal in everything. His hand cupped her face. Do you have any regrets? About that night at Azure Moon, about everything that came after? Teresa thought about the woman she'd been, trapped in corporate ambition, seeking validation from people who'd never truly see her. That woman had been sleepwalking through life, confusing safety for happiness, control for freedom. Not a single one, she said firmly. You freed me when you locked that door. You saw who I could become and challenged me to claim it. She pressed her hand over his heart, feeling its steady rhythm. I chose the monster, Jimin. And in doing so I became exactly who I was meant to be. His kiss was possession and devotion, promise and praise. When they broke apart, Jimin's forehead rested against hers, and in his eyes Teresa saw her own transformation reflected. The corporate analyst who'd become a queen, the woman who'd chosen darkness and found her own light within it. I have something for you. Jimin pulled a velvet box from his pocket. Inside lay a ring, a black diamond surrounded by rubies, beautiful and dangerous. Not an engagement. Not yet. But a promise. That wherever this empire goes we go together. That whatever battles come we fight them side by side. Teresa slipped the ring on her finger, feeling its weight settle like a crown. Together, she agreed. Always. Below them, Denver pulsed with life. Deals made in shadows, power-shifting hands, the constant dance of crime and consequence. But up here, wrapped in each other's arms, Teresa and Jimin stood untouchable. Two forces that had collided and merged into something greater than either could have been alone. She'd walked through that locked door 6 months ago not knowing what waited on the other side. Now she stood as queen of Denver's underworld, feared and respected, with the man she loved and chose daily beside her. The corporate analyst who'd once played it safe was gone. In her place stood Teresa Lawson, strategist, fighter, partner to Denver's most dangerous man. She'd shed society's expectations and found her true self in the darkness. And she had absolutely no intention of ever going back. Somewhere in the city, new threats were already forming. New enemies plotting. New challenges rising. But Teresa smiled against Jimin's chest, feeling his arms tighten around her. Let them come. She'd been forged in fire and baptized in blood. She was ready. They both were. And there you have it. Teresa's complete transformation from corporate analyst to queen of Denver's underworld. From that locked door at Azure Moon to ruling an empire beside the man who freed her darkest desires. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, don't let it end here. My next video drops soon with another dark romance that will consume you just as completely. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. Trust me, the next story involves secrets that could destroy everything, a love that defies every rule, and a choice that will leave you breathless. I'll see you there. Until then, stay dangerous.